For a company that was devastated in the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, when restaurants were forced to close their doors and cities all over the country shut down, Toast IPO comes amid a business renaissance. Luckily for you, Fortune Fastlane, for today's video, we will be talking about the restaurant app Toast and its IPO that turned its founders into billionaires. Following the technology provider for restaurants' initial public offering, Toast shares soared 56% in their New York Stock Exchange debut on Wednesday. With the sale of its shares at $40 each, the company, whose goods are used in more than 48,000 restaurants, raised about $870 million. Toast previously stated that it planned to raise the price of the offering from its initial range of $30 to $33 and then $34 to $36. The market value of Toast increased to over $31 billion when the stock closed at $62.51. In the early phase of the pandemic, April 2020, Toast cut half of its workforce, and in a blog post, CEO Chris Comparado stated in the month before, restaurant sales declined by 80% in most cities due to the necessary social distancing and government-mandated closures. As restaurants started offering takeout and contactless payments and eventually allowed customers to eat outside, sales quickly recovered. Toast customers were initially given a month credit towards software fees. They had free access to the company's technology, which allowed for takeout, online ordering, and gift card purchases. By the third quarter, sales had recovered and were even higher than they had been a year earlier, before the pandemic. Revenue increased by 24% to $823.1 million overall in 2020. And for the second quarter of this year, it nearly tripled to $424.7 million. The majority of that, more than 80% of it, comes from what the business refers to as financial technology solutions, which are financed primarily by fees from payment transactions. The remaining funds are obtained through a combination of hardware, paid subscription services, and expert services. The majority of that is returned to card networks and other payment processors because its revenue is so dependent on processing fees. Toast gross margin, or the revenue left over after deducting costs of goods sold, was 21% in the second quarter, significantly lower than the average software company's gross margin. Toast's net loss increased to $135.5 million in the second quarter from $53.7 million a year earlier as a result of rising costs for sales and marketing as well as R&D. Toast, a point-of-sale system provider, was established in Cambridge, Massachusetts in 2012. Initially, it focused on developing payment technology for restaurants. Before the pandemic, Toast was prospering by assisting restaurants in integrating their payment methods with other services like inventory control and multi-location controls for eateries with multiple locations. In February 2020, investors placed a $5 billion value on the business. In November, the company held a secondary share sale after the pandemic's recovery, allowing current and former employees to sell some of their vested stock at a price that valued the business at $8 billion. Investors may be celebrating Toast's expansion, but there are still some reservations about the restaurant sector, particularly as the rapidly spreading Delta variant continues to ravage large portions of the nation. On Wednesday, Comparado expressed optimism about the future of the restaurants on CNBC's Squawk on the Street. In the light of the Delta variant and COVID in general, Comparado stated that he believes the industry has been put to the test by the COVID pandemic. While Delta may put a damper on things, this industry is recovering. And we couldn't be more excited to lead the charge ahead as the industry recovers and restaurants start to thrive again, said the CEO of a restaurant chain. Steve Papa contacted Bessemer Venture Partners shortly after selling software company Endeca to Oracle in 2012 for over $1 billion with a hot tip. Three of these top engineers, he claimed, were developing a brand new project that Bessemer, which had previously backed Endeca, would be crazy to reject. Kent Bennett, a junior associate of the Endeca transaction, answered the call. He informed Papa that his team could use some open space at the company's Boston office. Bennett, however, was aware that he couldn't convince his company, one of the biggest and most successful in the venture industry, to give three engineers a check for an unidentified project. Bennett told Papa that he would simply send them there, where they could stay until he figured it out. The three men in a small office eventually evolved into Toast, a company that sells hardware and software to the restaurant industry. Toast made its New York Stock Exchange debut on Wednesday and ended the trading with a market capitalization of over $31 billion. Since then, it has dropped to $28 billion. The company's three billionaire co-founders, Steve Fredette, Emma Naran, and Jonathan Grimm, are still its top executives. Currently, Fredette, Naran, and Grimm work with about 2,200 others. They are known as Toasters. In 2015, Toast received the final investment from Bessemer, and Bennett was elected to the board. The returns would have been much higher had Bessemer invented earlier, although it is one of the largest holders with over 12% of the company. Bennett admitted to his teammate that passing was a massive mistake, not just Bessemer either. Due to the low margins and notoriously tight budgets in the restaurant industry, venture capitalists shied away. So at the beginning of 2013, Papa filed an initial gap for contributing $500,000 of his funds to the startup of his friends. According to Papa, who was a Toast board member until recently, I said, "Guys, it's not my space, but you helped me be successful, and I owe it to you," in an interview following the IPO. No matter what, I was going to assist them. In this instance, it referred to funding to get them going. Did we comprehend its shape at that time? No. The amount Papa has invested today is in the billions. His 12% ownership in Toast was valued at $3.1 billion as of Friday's close thanks to the initial investment and additional funding. He holds a smaller percentage of Toast shares than Bessemer, who owns $3.3 billion worth after investing just over $100 million between 2015 and the beginning of 2020. Not a West Coast offense. The tech industry's foundation is made up of startup origin tales. Facebook was founded by a brilliant Harvard dropout. Apple and Google both had illustrious beginnings in Silicon Valley garages. And Peter Thiel and Elon Musk collaborated awkwardly to create PayPal, which employed a long list of engineers who would later found other billion-dollar businesses. Thanks to the initiatives like Y Combinator, which over the past 10 years has evolved into a unicorn factory, Silicon Valley tales are becoming more and more formulaic. The business incubator offers a direct route to meetings with the top venture capital firms and has assisted in the creation of Dropbox, Airbnb, Stripe, DoorDash, Coinbase, and Instacart. Toast was created on the east side of the country, which is a world away. The founders were Boston area residents who had no intention of relocating. Boston used to be a hub for venture capital, but Silicon Valley was now the place where all the major exits were happening. Both locations house offices for Bessemer. One Bay Area VC expressed interest in a Toast pitch, according to Papa, but declined to fly. The East Coast roots of Toast, according to its president Fredette, allowed the business to be a little unconstrained by traditional wisdom of grow, grow, grow. In a Wednesday interview from the NYSE, Fredette said, "We used to talk about West Coast offense, which was the hype over substance. The East Coast would put substance ahead of the hype. A healthy amount of naivety was added by the founders. They were so unprepared for the fundraising and business in general, according to Fredette, that he and Naram, the chief operating officer, frequently argued during investor meetings. All the hours Fredette, Naran, and Grimm spent hanging out at Boston bars, cafes, and restaurants in search of inspiration led to the creation of Toast. They believed they had discovered a problem that could be solved by paying the check from their smartphone. If only the technology existed after one day when they had a particularly long wait for the check. They created an app and introduced it in 2012 at the Cambridge bar Firebrand Saints. Customers had a way to open a tab at the restaurant and link a credit card thanks to the app. We frequently went there for a burger and a beer after work, Fredette recalled. They signed up Dwell Time, a cafe in Cambridge, as they gradually increased their clientele in the area. Bennett had the opportunity to test the product there. The transaction was successful. Bennett was nevertheless wary of investing in a business that aimed to challenge established point-of-sale providers like Micros, which Oracle acquired in 2014 for $5.3 billion, and NCR. Bennett recalled telling the founders it would take them 5 years to build something workable. Adding to that, "To me, it sounded like a suicide mission." These legacy systems had 50,000 features in a really complex roadmap, despite being painfully old and outdated. In the meantime, Papa would soon begin flying across the nation to assist in securing new business deals and hiring talent. The Bay Area was one place he wasn't going. Papa said, "We purposely decided not to put reps in Silicon Valley. Potential rivals could keep arrogantly dismissing it as long as they didn't see the product in use," he claimed. Instead, Papa was visiting places like Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is the location of Gordon Food Service, a 25-year-old business. Gordon provided food to eateries all over the nation and developed into an important toast distribution partner. Papa said, "We concentrated in the middle of the country, which was largely ignored." Toast quickly changed from a few other locations, relatively basic mobile apps, to a more comprehensive back-end restaurant system that utilized Android tablets as terminals. At the time, iPads were a far superior product, and popular startups like Revel Systems were using them. Instead of being constrained by Apple's closed system, Toast chose Google's open-source Android technology, which allowed the company to design its hardware and customize the software. By the end of 2015, Toast had grown to 170 employees, generated millions of dollars in revenue, and was used in tens of thousands of eateries, including the 75-location Costa Vida chain and the 40-location West Coast Beach Hut Deli. Another Endeca alumnus, Chris Comparado, had recently been hired as CEO. At that point, Bessemer took the initiative and led $30 million around alongside Google's venture arm with a $100 million valuation. Bennett claimed that Toast's push into payments was a significant event that alerted his perspective. Toast finally had a volume business with a reliable and lucrative revenue stream as a full POS vendor, receiving a cut for every transaction on the system. According to Bennett, they supported software development with a margin from payment processing, and the business model was successful. Bennett stated that, "We've stood by anxiously as the team hit obvious product market fit but punted on raising more equity," in a memo to the company in December 2015. Bennett was having monthly dinners with the founders to persuade them to accept Bessemer's funding to join the cap table. He recalled saying, "I think this will be the biggest business Boston has ever seen," to Felda Hardiman, his mentor at the company. Similar statements were being made by Papa as he tried to attract investors. He stated on a slide on a presentation from June 2015 that Toast had the potential to build a $10 billion exit and the potential to be the next Uber or Airbnb valued in the many billions. Papa said, "To be fair to VCs, many people put stuff like that on the slides. We are biased toward survivors." Although Bessemer was very bullish, it never foresaw Toast's value reaching this level. In his memo, Bennett outlined possible outcomes and the amount of the company would profit from each one. The just goes nuts scenario and off-the-charts results in an $8.3 billion company and a $700 million profit for Bessemer. They're going to lose it. As a result of Toast's rapid growth over the following 4 more years, the company raised $400 million in February 2020 at a $5 billion valuation. The majority of the $665 million in yearly revenue came from payment transaction fees. A 10-year bull market in the technology sector that saw absurdly high valuations from all companies benefited Toast. It almost all collapsed a month after that massive financing round. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed Toast's obvious risk, its reliance on a single industry immediately. In March, restaurant revenue nationwide fell by 80% as infection spread quickly, killing Toast's business. Due to rapid decline in cash, Toast was forced to cut about 50% of its workforce in April, resulting in the loss of 1,300 jobs. Comparado announced the layoffs in a blog post, writing, "With limited visibility into how quickly the industry may recover and facing slower than anticipated growth, we find ourselves in the unenviable position of reducing our headcount." Panic took hold at the board level. Bennett said, "We immediately said we're burning through a ton of capital and are going out of business if we don't do something now. I distinctly recall thinking, oh my god, we're going to lose it," as each day passed. The speed of the rebound was even more unexpected. Restaurants reopened for takeouts and outdoor dining, and installed a ton of new technology to support mobile payments and contactless ordering. Inventory management, payroll, and multi-location menu controls, all of which help streamline a manager's job, had been added to Toast's POS system. But what eateries needed was a takeout app that integrated to their current system in a way to limit customer and waiter interaction. They turned to Toast as a result of more modern products like takeout curbside notifications, flat fee deliveries, and mobile software that allowed them to place orders and make payments using their devices. By the third quarter, revenue had increased year over year once more. Sales increased by more than 20% to $823.1 million for the entire year of 2020. The headcount has returned to the levels similar to those before COVID. According to Bennett, Toast developed a consumer brand during the pandemic. He is aware of this because his friends have begun telling him about their experiences using Toast-branded mobile payments at restaurants. Bennett recalled receiving 36 texts this year from friends saying, "This is the piece of bread from your t-shirts." The founders were initially inspired by the same concept 8 years prior, long before the necessary technology was available to make it work. On Wednesday, Naren claimed that the company had come full circle and that we were just too early. Bennett himself was taken aback by how many restaurants now make use of it. He had just finished a meal at Pammy's in Cambridge and was holding out for the check. He finally used the card to make the payment and then noticed the QR code on the receipt. The Toast payment option would have appeared on his phone and he scanned it. He said, "I would have been out there a lot sooner." Along with hearing from friends, Papa is now learning that the restaurant tech startup he backed almost 10 years ago is now worth close to $30 billion. Last Thursday, a friend sent him an email that read, "I remember you telling me exactly how this would all play out over lunch one day in Kendall Square. However, I don't recall you mentioning the pandemic part. Anyway, a remarkable success story." That's it for this video, Fortune Fastlaner. Remember to subscribe to our channel. And if you feel like we've delivered value, please share this video with one person. That's right, just one person. As a token of your appreciation for the hard work we put into making content that educates and helps you on your mission of building your own fortune. Remember, you can watch video after video, but it isn't until you take action that you'll start to see results. See you in the next one.